Welcome to the Barbell Nerds podcast. My name is Sean with my co-host Will Rattel. Today we welcome Colin Masterson, aka Birdie Fitness, onto the podcast. Along with his great golf game, Colin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
What's up, Sean? Will, thank you guys for both having me on tonight. It's a privilege to be on this podcast. Just give you a little bit of a background about myself. Obviously, right now, I'm at Villanova University as a sports performance coach. Similar to what Sean already said, we've had a little bit of a different path. Kind of Sean knew he wanted to get into strength and conditioning. Right off the bat, I was honestly completely different than him. I did not know I wanted to be in strength and conditioning. I knew I wanted to be in sports. After I was graduated college at Widener University, which is local to where I'm at now, I was an accounting major, so I was an accountant for 3.5 years before I eventually quit my position, moved down to the University of Maryland, interned there for about 9-10 months, and then had the great privilege to come up to Villanova and work with the football team with Mike Tucker. Fast forward about 9 more months, I got a full-time position. So I've been here for about 2.5 years, and then, it's obviously been weird now with COVID going on, so haven't had a real full go at it, since I've been hired. So it's kind of a weird path, honestly.
Yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about Birdie Fitness?
Yeah, so it's just something that kind of came about. I've enjoyed the game of golf ever since I've graduated. My college career, I was looking just to latch onto something, and I was an accountant. So usually the first thing you do is you buy yourself a set of golf clubs, just so you can kind of start playing. And that's kind of what I did. And then as I started to work with more teams at Villanova, women's tennis was one of them. That was one of the first teams I had. And then golf was kind of the next exposure I had. And then I picked up women's softball. So it really came down to more of the rotational athlete. But Birdie Fitness was something that I started kind of putting out content for, originally started for just golf. Now it's more of just athletes in general. And, I had a great talk with my director today, Kevin Miller. He said, we are doing a disservice if we're not kind of sharing kind of the knowledge that we have. So I'm not saying I have superior knowledge to anybody, but to the common person, I might have some knowledge. They might look up to and be like, oh man, that's a really good exercise, or hey, that's something I can implement in my training. So, thinking back, it's just a way to put out content, and hopefully people kind of gravitate towards it. And whether they like it or not, I'm kind of just putting it out for free and hopefully trying to help people out.
I love it. And I'm a huge fan of trying to promote the golfer as your actual athlete, because people watch the game of golf on TV or choose not to. A lot of people turn their noses away because it's not exciting. It's not athlete unless you know the game. And I think some of the newer athletes, the newer golfer athlete promotes a higher level of strength, a higher level of conditioning. So my first question about that is how do you go about choosing, because golfers play year round. They have they swing year round. They probably swing every day. How does a typical, what would a session or an hour-long session start with for you if a golfer comes in the weight room, whether it be around now or around July, depending on how often they play?
Yeah, and it comes down to, the golfer himself, how often they're playing, things of that sort. But if you're looking at, calendar year for school, they're going to have a fall season similar to, most other sports. They're going to have their fall season, and they're going to play up until about right around Thanksgiving, when they can't play up here on the East Coast anymore. So we're going to train pretty hard in the fall. And, I've kind of talked with their coaches, I don't care how they score in the fall. I want these guys to get stronger. I want them, to drive the ball further. I want them to feel good. At the same time, that's when our chance really is to put on some of the mass for these guys. And hopefully, a lot of these guys just don't have body awareness. They're not athletes when I get them. That's not all of them, but some are just golfers. So I pretty much try to expose them to a full realm of what an athlete would be doing. So I train them very similar to how I would train a lot of my other teams, whether that's lacrosse or baseball, as being that's, a rotational sport. We sprint them 2 times a week. They're doing their trap bar deadlifts. They're doing barbell glute bridge. I don't back squat them just for a reason, is to not axial load them. But, these guys have kind of understood that we're not just going to be doing golf training with, doing payoff press and rotational twists. We're actually going to push some weight and try and get these guys a lot stronger. So we've done some KPIs on these guys. We've done a flying 10, similar to what Sean said he's done with the lax team. We've done a vert jump test just to kind of see what kind of vertical power they can put out. And then from there, they have, the golf clubs where they can see where their club head speed has gone. So we got a couple guys who have some serious club head speed and have been able to get to the 118, 120 range, which is pretty impressive for those guys. And they're smacking the ball pretty far. So we have a couple of long hitters on the team. And like I said, it really comes down to me educating them that, hey, this isn't just for golf. This is to make you guys stronger, make you, better overall athletes, more robust athletes. So when you go and play your sport, we're not dealing with the low back injuries or, hey, my hamstrings are tight or, hey, I hurt myself doing this, my upper back. So it's kind of just a holistic approach to these guys, and it really comes down to education.
I love that you mentioned that you have the golfers sprint. You guys at Villanova do a lot of sprinting, it seems like, with Mike Tucker putting out that sprint timber, talking to Sean, he does a lot of sprinting with his team. Have you noticed that as guys improve their sprint speed, that maybe they hit the ball farther or like their exit velocity is a little bit better? Have you seen that?
So I don't have direct correlation with that. It's overall kind of what the guys kind of say is it's funny when you work with, so I've worked with football too. So those guys have sprinted before, they're athletes who have been exposed to some sprinting. But now I'm getting the golfers who these kids haven't sprinted since maybe they played like little league baseball or little league soccer or something like that. So when I ask them to sprint, honestly, we'll break it down to power speed versus they're not even like, sure what they're doing. It's like opposite arms to leg, same arm, same leg. So they look like they're newborn chickens, which is pretty funny just to see. I'm like, wow, these guys are college athletes and, they can't even do high knees right. But as the semester goes on and we expose them to it more and more, you kind of just see like their kinesthetic awareness, like it just starts firing and they kind of get it. So as much as there's coaching going on my aspect, it's kind of like, hey, see it. You guys know what you should look like. And then we use videos a lot. Like, hey, we'll take a video guide, like, hey, this is what you look like. They go, wow, like that looks terrible. And they've just improved kind of on themselves. So this has been my second full year with these guys. And honestly, from the time I got them to where they are now, I say it really comes down to them. They've dedicated themselves to getting better at this. But I would imagine that their club head speed and their ball distance has probably improved overall. One, just because I think they're more aware of how to use their body. But I don't have like direct KPIs that relate to that.
I was going to say that's what I would assume to be the biggest general factor when it comes to sprinting your golfing athlete, just being able to be more aware of where your body is in space. That's why I love a lot of the videos that you are posting, whether it be the heavy split squat with the dumbbells. I know you guys don't really have a hill in Villanova, but I assume you'd be utilizing that a lot. I know you guys do a lot of sled pushes too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is just the ultimate level of athleticism, is being able to push heavy sled, sprint, especially up a hill. I love hill sprints, as everybody knows that listens to this podcast. I guess how often do you sprint them? Yeah.
So
in season.
So in season we were doing it one time a week. So we kind of had them on a 3-day card. It was kind of like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And Friday was more before they actually started playing. We used that Friday to actually like, hey, we're going to throw med balls. We're going to kind of get like a primer going to set you guys up for a successful weekend. And then as they start playing, it becomes more optional. Like, hey, if you feel good doing a Friday, come on and do it. If you don't feel good doing a Friday, that's okay. It's non-judgment. You know what works best for you, what's going to set you up for success for the weekend. But on those Monday, Wednesdays, it's similar to other teams. Like we're going to do some ACL sprints and we're going to do some max velocity sprints. Now in season, we're not going to do the long buildups, but we're still going to try to expose them again, just because if you don't use it, you lose it, especially with speed. So for these guys, we're going to try and touch upon it at least one time a week for them. That can be tougher when it gets a little bit colder up here on the East Coast, but we have the sleds, which we utilized last year on the inside. So maybe we're not sprinting max effort, but we might do like a sled sprint where the body thinks it's sprinting really fast, but at the same time, you're pulling some weight. So you're doing a little bit of a resistance sprint, but you're still kind of getting the transfer of what we're looking for.
Yeah, I want to ask you about your assessments. So on your website, I looked at the assessment profiling you do, and you look at medical history, previous injury history, athletic background, and then you do a dynamic warm-up and you're assessing your athletes. Does your assessment change when you're working with golfers who are like, their sport is rotation and rotation? So does the assessment change, and like what specifically are you looking for in the assessments? What specific movements are you having them do when you're assessing them?
Yeah, really it comes down to, like you said, medical history. So previous injury, one of the biggest things you'll hear with golfers is they'll have that low back injury. So I always ask guys, like, do you have a low back injury? Is there anything I need to kind of keep away from to make you guys feeling good? And fortunately, we really haven't had any. We had one kid who has some low back issues, and really when we just elevate his deadlift off of DC blocks, he feels so much better. But looking at kind of like how we evaluate these guys, there's nothing super specific that we do. It's more, hey, let's run them through a warm up and have, pretty much two coaches on the floor. So it was myself and Matt Ambrose, who's another full timer here, who works with baseball. He would be on the floor with me, and as we run through that dynamic warm, it's like we're trying to hit the kind of a joint by joint in the warm up, and right then and there, you're kind of able to see like, hey, who's lacking what. Rather, it's hey, when we do like a cat cam, we can tell like they got a super tight upper back. We'll try and do some pelvic fault drills, like, hey, can you anterior and posterior pelvic tilt? If they're able to do that, hey, do they have any awareness of what it looks like to disassociate the upper body and the lower body? So we don't get super specific when we do dynamic warm, but there's certain things that we want to have these guys aware of, like, hey, these are things you guys can do in your dorm room, because again, we're only getting them sometimes 2 hours a week, and sometimes they're 45-minute sessions. So there's only so much we can do to get them ready strength wise. I think it's their buy-in, like, hey, what are you guys doing outside of here? So we try and give them some things that, hey, make sure you guys are working on this. Again, like the disassociation from their body, lower body, that's huge for their sport. Being able to anterior and posterior pelvic tilt, like, that's another one that I kind of stole from TPI as a general assessment of what they do. And then like they are IR and ER hip, we don't really get too much into it, but I'm able to kind of see, when we're throwing med balls, which guys kind of have a blocked off hip and which guys don't. So I guess that kind of falls into the assessment of, you're always just kind of being aware of what the guy's movement looks like when they're kind of working through the workouts in the weight room.
Are you looking at, especially, and this is especially when you throw med balls rotationally, are you looking at the degree to which they go into internal rotation on their back knee?
It's interesting because when I look at the lead leg, if I was to be throwing a med ball to my left and I'm hinging back kind of to my right, I kind of look to see like, hey, are they able to get into that back right hip? And when they do that, how much are they having knee valgus wise on their left leg? So you'll see it sometimes, like some guys literally have no rotation hip. It's all knee valgus, which isn't bad if you're looking at the golf swings. For other sports, you might be like, hey, like we don't want that. But for the golf swing, if you're looking at these top level guys, they're really loading, getting that knee valgus. So basically for us, it's, hey, can you get into that posterior hip? And then can you push your glute through when you're rotating? Because all your power is coming from your glutes and your hamstrings. So if they can push their glutes and actually feel themselves squeezing their glutes as they push through, I think overall we ask them, hey, do you feel that? It's kind of like, yes, I feel it, or no, not really. Or you can honestly see some guys who are just throwing with just their upper body. It's like, hey, I'm just using my upper body. I'm not even using my lower half. And there's a couple guys on Twitter who've done a really good job. Like Driveline does an awesome job of just putting out content of how the pelvis rises when they go to impact on their swing. Same thing with baseball. So I've kind of looked into them a little bit, and I would like to do more photo capturing and some video capturing of our guys just to see kind of where their pelvis is as we work through med ball throws and when they play their sport and if they have an efficient, kinematic sequence.
I've been lucky enough to have a father-in-law who is a youth softball and baseball instructor. So when he shows me videos of his young athletes and compares them to like professional athletes or professional baseball softball players, like he shows me, look at that knee angle, look at that hip, look at that drive force. So I get to see a little bit more from a rotational aspect, and it's pretty amazing how much knee action and how much power goes through the hips all the way through. And that's just a nice way to kind of segue into what type of work are you using to train their ankle or their foot, because obviously the power comes from the hips, got to go through the leg down all the way to the foot and go fluctuate into the ground.
I think it comes with pretty much all our lower half exercises. Like we teach these athletes, like, hey, it all starts with your foundation. So we teach them using their feet. So to grip the ground, like, hey, we got a big toe, pinky toe heel. We're trying to grip that ground and be active through that. This semester, Sean did a really good job. We kind of program as a whole for the staff, with all our teams, just because with contact tracing, we weren't sure if one of us would be out, this and everything, so we were able to cover for one another. So we got into a lot of, single leg work, which I think was really good. And we eventually got into some of the floating heel stuff that Sean, I don't know if he kind of posted on his Instagram or not, but we got into some floating heel stuff to really work on some, foot strength all the way through the range of motion, which I thought was awesome, and we kind of do it ourselves as a staff, is we kind of do all these exercises just to see kind of what they should be feeling and how they should be feeling it. So those are some of the specific things that we've kind of gotten into. But for the main part, we're just training these guys and kind of teaching like, hey, what you should be feeling, how it should be feeling. And if they aren't feeling it, always, feel free to come ask us a question.
Yeah, you mentioned lower back pain briefly. Is most of that lower back pain, is that chronic or is it acute with the golfers?
I think it could be either. It all depends on, I guess, like how efficient their sequence is, really, like if they're using their hips or not using hips. What you'll see a lot is when they go through the swing, they call it either like overarching of the low back. And you'll see a lot of times, like when athletes do some Olympic lifts, like when they push press, things like that, they don't have the lat mobility and shoulder mobility. So they're overarching that low back. And then all those forces are just kind of going down to the L4 or 5, is where you see a lot of that, I guess compression is where they have that lower back pain. But fortunately, we've kind of been, in a good spot where we haven't really had much issues with any low back stuff. And I would probably attribute that to, like I said, we jump these guys, we sprint them, and we throw a bunch of med balls. And honestly, they push some weight, so they've become pretty robust. And again, that's attributed to those guys kind of buying into the program. But fortunately, we haven't had any low backs, which has really kind of been good for those guys, honestly, and really good for me.
It'd be really nice to have a bunch of golfers that are meatheads deep down.
They're getting there. It's funny, man. Like I never thought I'd see the day where they didn't really want to push it, but these guys are always chomping at the bit to kind of get after it. And as soon as we got cut for the last week, they're like, "Hey, where's the program? Like I want to try and get back in the weight room right away. I don't want to lose my gains." These guys all want to bench 225, which for some reason I don't understand. But we try and tell them that's not a big deal. But we're trying to get them stronger in their lower half, and the upper body will come.
Very cool, very cool. So I'm thinking about what your schedule kind of looks like, especially COVID aside, what the golfing schedule looks like, because they play. I would assume their first kind of big-ish tournament is in March or early spring.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but what do your 2 months leading up to that look like from a performance perspective? Whether it's increase the amount of sprinting you do, or at least increase the amount of sprint varying you do versus loading, everything along those lines. What goes through your brain when you're looking at the 2 months prior to the big tournament?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really comes down to just communication with those guys. Like, hey, be honest with me. What did you do over break? If you did nothing over break, like we're going to probably have to revert, not ground zero, but hey, we're going to, push it back a couple of weeks. So for me, I would say I'd start out pretty general with, we're going to use a lot of kettlebells and just, regroove those movements that we've kind of done before. So we'll probably go a little bit of a higher rep range, and, we're thinking working up and down the force velocity curve. So when those guys eventually come time to compete, it's like, hey, we want to make sure we're peaking, I guess, quote unquote, peaking for a time. Like, hey, we want to be able to, be hitting heavier weights, but for, singles, doubles, or triples, probably more triples for these guys. We're not going to really hit any singles, but it's funny. Last year we got into some trap bar jumps for these guys. So something they've never been exposed to. But again, it starts with, hey, a foundational trap bar deadlift, right? We might start from the blocks, and then we might lower it, and then we'll probably get into a trap bar where we're just trying to tell these guys, hey, speed of movement is the most important thing for you guys to make sure you're ready to go. And then realistically, when it gets into season, it's, hey, we're trying to eliminate soreness. So can we go, more concentric based movements, whether it be, non-counter movement jumps, whether it be, like I said, the trap bar jumps, whether it be floor press, to try and eliminate some of the issues of soreness with the upper body. So realistically, I said, it's trying to work up and down the force velocity curve, keep them exposed to as much as we can, like we did in the off season, but realistically eliminate most of the soreness so that when they go into the weekend, they're feeling healthy and they're feeling fresh.
Yeah, I actually kind of want to take this another route, if that's okay. I want to ask you about cool downs, because I was reading your blog, and if I could just read an excerpt from it. You say, "We live in a sympathetic world, constantly on the run. Thinking of the college athlete, from the minute they wake up to the time they fall asleep, they are going. Not much is different from those of business America. Is there any time during the day where we try to tap into the parasympathetic nervous system?" So my question to you is, do you think college athletes spend enough time in the parasympathetic nervous system? If not, why not? And then you mention in that same article about like breathing techniques to make sure we get into this parasympathetic nervous system right after your training session. Do you think that has a significant impact on the athlete's ability to recover if they do those six long deep breaths right after they train?
Science has said yes. And one of the things is, like, again, we're trying to expose these guys to as many things as we can, whether it's, a breathing technique, whether it's foam rolling. But the thing you'll see is what we've kind of gotten as a response, like, hey, coach, can we do the breathing today? We want to do the breathing. Can we get on our backs, turn the lights off, do the breathing? So they've bought into it, and it's something that they like.
I think they just want a nap during that time, really. They just want 5 minutes. Yeah. Let's be honest.
And if it is those 5 minutes for them to nap, that might be the only nap they're getting all day. But you just, and that's the thing that we talk about, honestly, as a staff, is just how much stress is on these kids being at such a, strong academic school, having to compete in a college sport, having to be weightlifting, they got boyfriends and girlfriends. They might have breakups. You never know what's going on in their family life. Right now we have COVID going on. God knows what these kids have going on at home, if their parents are in lockdown, if their grandparents are sick. So there's so much that's going on. If we can get these kids to relax for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever it is, get them off their phone and just relax and breathe, I think it really goes a long way. And that's something that I've kind of tried to preach to them and honestly do myself. It's like, hey, can I just, for 2-3 minutes, put the phone down, just turn everything off and just try and focus on my breathing. And honestly, I feel a little bit better. And like I said, the athletes kind of ask for it. So whether they're taking a nap or not, maybe we are tapping into a little bit of the parasympathetic state. And again, it's just another tool for these guys that when they go to a tournament, maybe it's something they utilize, maybe something they don't. But again, it's another tool for their toolbox.
I like that. And I finished up reading The Oxygen Advantage back when I was at North Dakota, one of my first years there, actually. And I'm listening to Patrick McCowan on the Muscle Expert podcast, I think, right now, as I go to and from work. And I'm just reminded of how much people in general, even without COVID going on, how sympathetic they are, whether they're at their desk kind of like hunched forward. Like, we are constantly in technically the fetal position because we're always hunched over, shoulders forward, neck forward. Do you focus, I guess, even in your own training, more on the extension type of work to try to balance that out? Or do you, because I know there's a lot of work that is done in flexion that's very good for like the hip, the internal rotators, the transverse abdominis. Like, how do you consider that when you program?
Yeah, I mean, we're always trying to, when we get these guys, you said, like, if they're at their desk, while they're sitting in a 50-minute class, whether on their phone, where they're eating in the cafeteria, whatever it is, they're constantly in that kind of hunch position with the forward head posture. And honestly, if I take it back to TPI, like, that posture is not great for them when they're set up. They call that C posture, which isn't a great setup for them. So we're constantly just trying to work against that, whether it's band pull aparts, whether it's TRX rows, whether it's, doing YTAs, all sorts of different things that we're just trying to work on so they're not, whether around it. But at the same time, we don't want to be, too much in a good position where they're kind of overextended either. And, our director, Kevin Miller, says all the time, like, your best athletes are overextended. So there's a part of extension which is kind of acceptable, and he relates it back to, like, your track and field athletes. Like, you look at them, like, their hips are back. Some of the best football players, these guys that are super fast, their hips are back a little bit and they are extended. As long as it's not causing some chronic pain, like, I think we're going to be okay with those guys being a little bit extended. I'd rather have them probably in a little bit of extension rather than too much flexion where, you're starting to get some of the rounded shoulders, you get some of the tight pecs and those sorts of issues.
Do you do anything else other than like the breathing techniques with your athletes to help them get to that parasympathetic state?
We do a lot of foam rolling stuff, some of that soft tissue work, which they say can sometimes bring you to that parasympathetic state as well. So we'll do some, just general foam rolling. We kind of teach these guys, again, starting from the, ankle all the way up to, the upper back neck area. There's another thing that we'll do is just, similar thing. It's just with the lax ball. So maybe they can trigger point some of those spots a little bit better. And again, like I said, it's all tools that they can utilize, whatever they really want to, choose as their, recovery modality. But we're trying to give them as much that we kind of have, available to us at Villanova and say, hey, like, you guys can take a lax ball if you're traveling. If you want to take a foam roller, feel free to take a foam roller. If it's, I don't know, whatever it is, the stim machine. Like we have a bunch of stim machines. If these guys want to take stim because that's what makes their low back or upper back feel loose before they play, like feel free, go at it. So again, it's all tools that they can kind of pick and choose whatever makes them perform the best.
You mentioned a little bit ago that you didn't back squat the guys. First of all, I love that because I know exactly how that feels on the back, even if it's just like a day before I go. If I played softball, and unfortunately my fall season is over, but if I played softball like the day before, I know if there's something that's been heavy that's been on my back. Like I know it. So the fact that you do that, the fact that you're aware of that is very cool. My question is still reverting to training. Have you dug into the isometrics, like the heavy isometrics, like your heavy split squats, either safety bar, double dumbbell, heavy RDLs, or that kind of stuff to really drive the tendon strength, the connective tissue tensile strength?
Yeah. It's funny you say that. We did a ton of, just iso holds at the end of this year's lifting because, Sean kind of said on the podcast that we were in a tent all semester. So we didn't have everything that we would normally have in a weight room, but we had trap bars. So trap bar, was one of the main lower body movements that we did, but we also did barbell glute bridge. So that's where we actually implemented the isos. So, it was an iso at the top, hold, contract those glutes at the top, make sure you're not overextend it, push that belly button down to try and really get that glute strength. Sean has shown me some research papers that the barbell glute bridge is just as effective, if not more effective, than the squat. So why not just use it? So we barbell glute bridge these guys. We didn't do much, split squat with heavy dumbbells just because we didn't have them down there, but we did do like a goblet split squat. So again, I'm big on the unilateral training just because of the pelvis. Like we're able to, function the pelvis, and you're going to anterior and posterior rotate with different parts of the pelvis. And I think that honestly has eliminated a lot of the low back pain. Is you get these guys that are so caught in just bilateral movements all the time. When you get them in a unilateral, whether it's a front foot elevated, a rear foot elevated, just a regular split stance, holding long isos, holding eccentrics, full range of motion, I think you're going to try and eliminate some of that low back pain. It's because these guys have never been exposed to, the pelvis moving in two different directions kind of at once.
Yeah, and you said your golfers want to get their bench press up to 225, and you also said, or you mentioned that that's probably not the most important thing for those guys. But so what does the upper body training look like for them? Is there anything that you think you specifically want to work on for them? I'd just like to hear you give your thoughts on the upper body stuff for golfers.
I mean, if you're thinking just upper body, things that we do is we do a ton of rowing. So that's huge for us, different angles, whether they're on a bench, whether they're flat, whether they're doing a cable row, whether they're doing pull aparts, face pulls, we're going to do a ton of rowing. We usually do like a floor press for them. It's just been the one that I feel safest doing. And then we'll just change up the variation of it, whether they use a fat bar, whether they use a Swiss bar, we use a regular bar, and then we'll tag tempos on that. Those would be like the main upper body exercises that we do. We do a ton of push-ups with these guys. Again, they're not the strongest upper body guys, and you'd be amazed at how much, a tempo and a push-up with a 10-second eccentric, the 10-second iso can really kind of put these guys under a little bit. And then if you say like, hey, total body exercise, upper body exercise, from there, we'll pretty much go total body. So if you're looking at upper body, we do a ton of extensive med ball stuff with these guys, whether it's chest pass, whether it's overhead pass, whether it's rotational throws. That's another one that I would say is more total body, maybe dynamic upper body for these guys. But other than that, we're kind of just loading up with change for these guys, getting some horizontal pressing, and then, whether it's vertical pulling or horizontal pulling for those guys, that's pretty much the main exercise we'll keep it to.
So when you say the extensive med ball, are you talking about like 50 to 100 throws against a wall really quick, short range of motion?
Yep, exactly. We'll do like 25 to 30 reps for those guys and be like, hey, you and your partner just switch and just go.
All righty, Colin. I think we're just about wrapping up here. Thank you very much for coming on and sharing some of your thoughts, some of your programming, some of your insight into the golfing athletes, because now I need to go out and work all winter and try to at least get my game, quote, up to par, so that you and I can head out next summer and
I can barely even swing
Freddie Mitchell. Well, go into Birdie Fitness and he'll take good care of you. Colin, again, thank you so much. We ask everybody that's on our podcast who would you recommend us reaching out to get or to invite on next? So who you got for us?
Well, keeping it with inside Villanova, Matt Ambrose is a guy who is a legit strength coach. Like, he is exactly what you expect. That guy can put up some heavy weight. He coaches hard. He's intense. He's a big time strength coach. So Matt Ambrose, the guy, and he's someone I'd feel free to kind of get you guys in contact with. Our director, Kevin Miller, who's another one, and he is more of a holistic approach to fitness. Like, he's everything from nutrition to, the mental game, to breathing and recovery, to actually training, whether it's a young athlete or an older athlete, who's a great one. And then I have a buddy who, coaches out UNLV for football right now. His name's Brandon Garcia. He's another guy who's kind of been in the private sector. He was with me at Maryland. Now he's out at UNLV. He's a great guy that, again, I would love to get in contact with you guys just to get some exposure on what they're doing out there on the West Coast with football.
Very cool. I feel like we should just have like the Villanova staff come on and do like a round table discussion for us. And I think that would just be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're going to have
Sean, we got Colin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Awesome. Colin, thank you so much. We appreciate the time, buddy. Hope you guys have a very successful. Hope you guys get back into a lot of training, because I know it's been kind of stalled in the Philadelphia area right now. So I hope you guys get back to training very, very quickly. And when you guys do, best of luck in your seasons, brother.
Awesome,
Thanks,
man. I appreciate both you guys. Have a great holidays. All right.
You do the same. Happy Thanksgiving.
All right. Talk soon.